Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film The Hunger Games: Mockingjay Part 1. The Hunger Games are an odd franchise because they almost do satire. They almost have good action sequences. They almost do a lot of things, but they never successfully and amazingly do much of anything. They're dystopian, hugely popular YA movies, but they never really get into it. They've never had a really great director direct any of their films. You can really tell that. I've never really been won over by them, and I've seen all of them, kind of hoping to get into them. And even though I think the last one was an improvement, this one is going in the opposite direction. And when I thought they could almost do a lot of things, in this, I almost got a full movie, but didn't really. Hunger Games: Mockingjay takes place right where Catching Fire left off. Katniss is PTSD'd out from her experiences in the two Hunger Games. She is in District 13 underground with the rebellion. She originally doesn't really want to join the rebellion and be their symbol, their Mockingjay. She is not as sure about it, feeling that she's already been used by the Capitol with Donald Sutherland, but the Goebbels of this rebellion, Philip Seymour Hoffman, have decided to make her the symbol for this rebellion, and at first it's not really working. They can't film good propaganda spots with her. It's not very convincing, which is one of the few funnier parts. But then Woody Harrelson's character of Hamish, he has her go to the various districts who have been destroyed and show her real emotions to convince people through this propaganda to fight back against the Capitol. And one of her agreements to being this symbol is that they eventually get PETA back, and they try to build up the rebellion against the Capitol while also worrying about PETA. This movie is a little hard to describe because I'm not sure what it's exactly doing. And I think the problem with a part one, when it's something that was never meant to be a standalone piece, is that it has no cohesiveness. And this story in itself isn't very cohesive. What's funny, when I was thinking about the Deathly Hallows part one, is totally this road movie with the Horcruxes, and there's lots of fun action sequences, and I could tell you what that movie's about very quickly, and it had a really cool ending that made me want to come back for more. And then when I watched Mockingjay Part 1, this is building to something, but we never get there. So what I'm watching is the beginning of something that I assume the next one will be a crazy battle, just like in Deathly Hallows Part 2, and they'll stand up against the Capitol. My other issues are really issues I've always had with the franchise. It never really takes advantage of the satirical angle that it could clearly play into. They do more so in this movie than they've done in any of the previous films. They even have one of the segments where she goes to, I think, one of the districts, I don't know. At the end, it has the same logo and the Mockingjay theme as one of the Hunger Games trailers, and that was a nice meta moment. I didn't think they would actually do that. And they kind of do go into the fact that she's a symbol, and it is a bit meta because it's Jennifer Lawrence and she's a big important star to a lot of people, and Katniss is kind of a big important star to this rebellion. And that was interesting, and I liked some of the stuff they were doing with it, but it didn't really have too much of an overall thesis with it. It's just like, okay, we're pointing out that she's being used by these people, and they're pointing out this new rebellion that's ran by Julianne Moore might not be the best. We're not really going to go into that fully. It would be more interesting if it was more cynical about what it's satirizing with this media propaganda. It's not very cynical, it's too earnest, and it kind of felt like people who probably would be cool with making propaganda trying to talk against propaganda. It wasn't people who understood the evil in it. I always felt like maybe someone who makes the Hunger Games movies should check out like a Verhoeven movie like Starship Troopers. The funny thing is, this film takes itself so seriously, it's so grim and dark, and it's talking about PTSD and all these issues, and then it leaves a bunch of things on the table that it could really have fun with. This obviously has to stay kind of true to the book. I know they added the character of Effie that Elizabeth Banks plays, and I actually like that she was back. You could never do a really wild adaptation of this, and I kind of feel like maybe this should have had more of a wild adaptation, because it felt like they were too beholden to their source material. That's one of the things I've always had a problem with these new adaptations. Not that everything needs to have a crazy adaptation. They feel like they're being held back. Now, maybe it's because Gary Ross is a director I actually quite like because of Pleasant Film, but he's not an adventurous action director. And Francis Lawrence is just not an adventurous action director whatsoever. If you had someone who could really have a lot more fun with Mockingjay, then you could have an interesting movie. It's there. It's always there with these movies. The ideas are there, but nobody plays with them enough. No one really makes it so I leave and go, oh my god, this is talking about this and this. And it's like, yeah, it brings those things up, but it does like nothing with them. I've been constantly really let down by this franchise. I never can fall in love with it. I like a lot of the actors that are in it, but I never want to watch them again. And more so with this one. It's about this PETA thing, and so now she likes PETA. I thought she didn't like PETA, and she keeps bringing it up. It's like, okay, I'm sorry PETA got left behind, but like there are bigger things to do. There are like a lot of people dying. There's like all this cool rebellion stuff, and we got to hear about this guy you were in the Hunger Games with. Like maybe just like let it go. Show the more interesting parts, these people fighting, and we don't really get to see that. The action sequences in this, it did look better, especially the part you've seen in the trailer where she shoots down a plane. That was really cool, but there's really just not enough of it. The cooler action sequences you've seen in the trailer. Some of the reasons I dislike this movie is because it honestly doesn't play into being a big movie. But the thing is, when it's playing against that, having all this like dark, brooding character development type stuff, it's just also because it doesn't work. I have very little attachment to these characters. They don't feel like real people because they're never that fun. They're never people I want to hang out with. Oh, I can't wait to be bummed out at their weird dystopian future society. I like Jennifer Lawrence in this role. I like her in her bigger blockbuster roles, but I still have always felt that she's much better in the smaller films, particularly the David O. Russell movies. This is the role that she's most popular for, but I guarantee you in 40 years they'll bring these up because they're popular, but they'll be talking more about Silver Linings Playbook. Philip Seymour Hoffman is quite good in this. I liked him as this head of propaganda, and a lot of the older actors really do actually steal the show. Philip Seymour Hoffman and Jeffrey Wright together were very good, and Julianne Moore is good in doses, but she's supposed to be this great leader, and I didn't feel like she exuded that when she was giving the speeches. It doesn't really matter to me what her gender is or something like that. It's just like she didn't feel like a leader, like a president or like a political figure. That to me like made it less convincing. The thing when you have a great actor who embodies a role is you can be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I get that why everybody likes this person. And she didn't really do that, so it kind of weakens the argument really. One of the worst people in all of the Hunger Games films has been Liam Hemsworth, and I think this is his worst performance, probably the film that uses him the most, which is kind of unfortunate. Maybe they didn't see this coming. But he's not very charismatic. The love triangle thing doesn't really work because you don't get any sort of charisma between him and Jennifer Lawrence. I wish they had a better actor in the role. It's kind of a thankless role, but he does not do that role any favors. And if you look at how Catching Fire ended with this oomph, like, oh shit, all this stuff's going down. She broke down the Hunger Games. All this stuff is going to happen in Mockingjay Part 1. And this just ends. There's no cliffhanger really. It's just kind of like, okay, I guess they're probably gonna fight and have a big war with the Capitol and stuff. When you're making a part 1, you need to get it to work as one movie. And this film doesn't really do that. So it leaves things unfinished. It leaves things on the table. It doesn't explore certain avenues that would be interesting, that would make this film a lot more thought-provoking. And I've thought that with all the Hunger Games films. They just leave things there. Why get into the nature of reality TV and the whole like Chomskyan idea of an opiate of the masses? They don't really get into that. Instead, they have just weirder decisions and stupid names for certain things that make no sense. None of these films have changed my mind over time. They've never really sunk in with me because they're not really saying very much of anything. They're these grim dystopian movies where these kids have to fight in an arena, and this film doesn't have that. This is kind of why this film is perfect to compare to the Deathly Hallows, because that was the film where they weren't in school. There's a lot of reasons that Deathly Hallows Part 1 works and this doesn't. They didn't have an idea towards the movie. It's just half of a movie. The first one in Deathly Hallows is more of a road picture. The second one's the big battle. This is not anything. It's setting things up. It's not kind of acting like they're building to much of anything other than a big action sequence. And it's so dull. It's so boring. I'm kind of sick of these movies. They're just like not things you want to experience again. You just go, because it's incomplete, because it's not a whole idea, because I'm not leaving thinking about all these different ideas with it. I'm leaving thinking about like, why are these things so popular? They're not horrible. I'm not mad at the Hunger Games movies, but they just, like this movie, don't match the full potential of the ideas that they have in this film. So if you have seen The Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 1 and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.